I'm all settled in now. I believe this is the ninth episode of this. If I'm wrong, then it's not the ninth. It's another number. It has been a long day. And I thought about a couple of topics to do today, but I think what I'm going to do is answer some questions that were asked on the YouTube comments. So this is a segment where we're just going to answer questions, and I'll do this as frequently as I get enough questions to do what I think is going to be a full episode. I don't know how long this is going to run. I don't know how much I'm going to talk. We're just going to get into this and see where it takes us. So it's a bit of a adventure, I suppose. Kind of a stab into new territory. I've never done a answering question session before, so I think it'll be interesting. Last week we talked a lot about loss. That was a pretty emotional and emotionally draining episode for me. And I hope that those of you that have viewed it found it enjoyable. Those of you that are unfamiliar with this, I probably should have done this first, but you know how I am. This is where I discuss my experience living for about 2 decades in an off-the-grid religious cult. Off the grid means off the grid. There wasn't generators. Well, there was a generator to run a welder, which the Lord wanted. But houses, no electricity, no running water, no modern conveniences at all, really. Everything was horse-powered, or most things were horse-powered, I should say. A lot of hard work. A lot of very complex religion, and this show is me kind of just laying all that out as much as I can remember. I think that how much I can remember is pretty limited because as it turns out, I think it was a traumatic experience, and well, I don't seem to remember a whole lot of times. But anyway, welcome to it. Whether this is your first time viewing this particular series, your first time on this channel, or you've returned, welcome. Just after last week, a viewer asked, how were you treated outside the community by people on farms around you and by people in town? In town meaning the nearby towns, Davis City and Lamoni, Iowa, east and west respectively. I don't think that we had a relationship. I wouldn't say that by and large we were liked in community. I think there were various degrees of tolerance and a healthy degree of out and out antagonism. But the people who were antagonized most of the time, golly, I got something going on. Most of the people that were antagonistic or aggressive were people that had had bad experiences, specifically with my uncle. I don't think that, doggone it, I don't think that they were just antagonistic for the sake of being antagonistic. I do think that there was a number of teenagers that were driving around in pickup trucks, as you will, in rural Iowa, and screwed around. There were some fires set outside the gate that was outside the community. There was mailboxes smashed. In the earlier days of community, there was some firearms discharged over the the villages. The village was in a valley, and there was a hill, and somebody allegedly shot over the villages. No one was injured, but there was some pretty wild shit that happened. I think that there were some things stolen. Window was broken out of a shed. So some of that was just younger people being idiots and bored in the country. And I think some of it was very definitely hostile. That was mostly in the earlier years of community. The community kind of became a fixture in the area, I would say, after probably a decade or 15 years maybe. And for the most part, people left us alone. Now, we regularly trespassed onto other people's property, and I think that kind of nurtured a spirit of ill will with several of the ranchers and farmers around there. Kind of known for just being pushy. So that was a thing. And the people in town, Davis City, I don't think they thought about us at all. Lamoni, pretty much my whole growing up, Lamoni was billed as an evil city. In fact, I think that the city was banished. It was banished. I forgot all about that. I spoke about banishment a time or two ago. No, that was actually last time. Where that is basically considering someone dead. So the city was considered dead. It was not allowed to even go within the city limits unless it couldn't be helped. There was a dentist there that we used, and a vet, and some various other things that people would do there. If people had family, then exceptions were made. And that was due to persecution towards my uncle, alleged persecution, specifically from members of the church there, the Community of Christ, which at the time that community was organized and we moved out on the land, it was known as the RLDS, or Reorganized Latter-day Saints. At any rate, there was apparently a great deal of hostility and sorcery, which I'll talk about later on, that took place in the town of Lamoni. When I left, I found very, very little evidence of that. Many people who had been friends and confidants of my uncle only spoke to me about good memories, and at this point I was very, very angry and just emotional, and didn't have any problem with anybody talking any shit. And these people, you know, I saw them out and about in the town, and they had been, as I said, friends of my uncle, and when they talked to me, the only thing that they could express to me was sorrow at losing his friendship. Many of them felt like they had to choose between their families who didn't want to move out to the land and the message that he preached, which they liked. So they made the decision they felt was right at the time. Turns out that was probably the right decision. But a lot of people just looked at me and said, "I don't know what happened. He was my friend." A guy literally said those words to me. And that was kind of an eerie experience. And by eerie, I mean that I had been gaslighted or gaslit, or whatever the past tense of that word would be, into believing that Lamoni was this town full of vendetta, dead set against community, and I didn't find that. There were definitely people who didn't disagree with it, or didn't agree with it. There was very definitely people who thought that it was a bad idea or whatever. But in terms of hostility, I don't think I really found it. And I looked. So that sensation of years of thinking of something as a certain way and then finding out that that really wasn't the case at all was that was a wake-up call for me. I did not expect that. I expected that when I moved to Lamoni that all these people would be saying all these bad things and just really hard against the community, and that wasn't the case at all. So, in terms of what the general mood was, I think that at first it was these people are crazy, and then by just dint of the passage of time, people became indifferent. So that's that. The next question, moving forward, what was yours, everyone's continued relationships with the Native Americans? We had pretty, I would say, a decent relationship with the South Shore Chippewas up in Wisconsin, on the Red Cliff Reservation especially. I think that was a good relationship. I think there were parts that were definitely annoying to the Ojibways up there. One of them was kind of the pressure, or not kind of, was very definite, the very definite pressure from community that we had a truth that they didn't, that we knew the true secret and had the true religion, that they should convert or should incorporate our way of thinking. And I'm not terribly sure that that was expressed that honestly, but it was very definitely alluded to, and I think that actually caused offense a couple times. As to my relationship now, I don't have much of a relationship with those people anymore just because I'm 13 hours away, and I haven't been up there in 4 or 5 years. I need to get back and see my family and friends up there. The last time I was up there, it was what it was. They experienced a very different version of me than they had previously, and I think that threw them off a little bit, but there was still a lot of mutual love and regard. I had a lot of really good experiences up there, just mingling with them, eating at their table, working for them, learning a little bit of the language. It was a good time. I miss them. Oh, and did they, the next question is related to that question, did they, I'm assuming the Native Americans, ever question Ron's authority? I don't know. I don't know. They certainly didn't think that he had any authority to tell them what to do or what not to do in their spiritual matters. And I think that they pretty much said that. But as for his authority to run his own operation, I don't remember anything to that effect said or even alluded to. I think that they just thought that he was doing his thing and they were doing theirs. Built a few birch bark canoes up there. That was an experience. God dang it. And that is why I'm not a sleight of hand magician. I drop everything. What exactly is a sorcerer according to them? I don't know if that's Native Americans or community. I can't say what a sorcerer would be to a Native American. I think it would just be somebody who was using their spirituality to harm somebody undeservingly. But once again, I'm absolutely not qualified to answer that. According to community, sorcery. Sorcery was pretty much the negative of community's practice, specifically in righteousness or the interaction with the Christ Spirit in creation. That was also referred to as the misuse of element, or the use of the element of wickedness. Obviously, and I haven't talked much about this, and I'm probably in remiss for that, but using the elements that were the fallen watchers or the evil angels, such as meteorite, iron, copper, or the writing on tombs, electricity, mercury, lead, the law of man, which is any law that isn't community rule, more or less. Using those with your prayers and using their evil definitions or what have you would be sorcery. But also, if a person were to take one of the good watchers and compel it by dint of the force of will, I guess, in a way that was opposing what their definition was, that would be also be considered sorcery. So I gave the example of the oak tree having the definition of strength. If that was used to make a person weak or to give strength to something evil, then that would be sorcery. Righteousness, how a man performed righteousness was he had to be virtuous, and his marriage had to be good, and he had to be hearing the Spirit and in tune with the nuances of God, and then he could combine his prayers with those various elements that are found in the earth to magnify his prayers and cause effect. A sorcerer was someone who did that, but it was for evil or not for Christ. Is magic something they practiced? Was sorcery black magic? The next two questions that are related to that question, and I would say kind of black magic, even though I don't know if they would have ever used that term. In terms of magic, they don't consider it magic, they consider it righteousness. They consider it something with God, so it's not magic. That said, by anyone else and on the entire face of the planet, it would be considered something in the vein of the magic tradition, yes. It would be considered a pagan approach to the spiritual or to religion. It would be, a magical approach to Christianity. Like I said, that is not a stance that they would have taken, but, or anything that they would have said, but very definitely, and there's a timer, very, very definitely it is magic in the magic tradition, even though it has the taint of Christianity and the focus on God. It still, for all intents and purposes, is magic. We're going to go ahead and reset this. Doggone it. That reminds me, I was watching Bill Dance bloopers the other night. Bill Dance is a fisherman. I guess he had like some TV show where he was fishing, and his bloopers are absolutely incredible. because he says dadgummit and doggone it all the time, and oh shoot. Dude, I was laughing so hard, I don't know, about seized up. But anyway, I said doggone it, and it reminded me of that. So that's sorcery. So last week when I talked about how I influenced the death of a woman I considered to be my grandmother with sorcery, what that was meaning was I was saying prayers without my eye solely on Christ. That I was doing so for other reasons, ulterior motives, or some kind of falseness. I'm assuming that was for my own personal glory or something like that. I'm not actually sure what the fuck that means. But that was what was alluded to, if not, and if it was ever said, that was never said clearly and honestly in my presence. Other people have said that to me. I have no reason to doubt those people, especially in light of the fact that it was very certainly alluded to in my presence in meetings that were constantly happening. I couldn't even go out into the woods and cut wood by myself without somebody crawling up my ass and trying to have a meeting with me. So it just that you're living in a community, so I suppose the concept of something being invasive is maybe a little strange, but my God, it was invasive. Just no rest, and that constant strain it made me really, really paranoid. It about broke me. That constant meeting, that constant trying to convince me that I was wrong, that constant accusation of all kinds of wild fucking things. Was certainly a struggle and certainly invasive. And on that note, I suppose we'll just go ahead and move to the final question. And I love these questions, by the way. If you guys have any questions, be sure to ask them. Don't think they're stupid. No question is too small or to be addressed. There's no such thing as a dumb question. Explaining this is very hard because being this close to it, it's hard to get myself in the mindset of knowing what you all don't know. So ask the questions. We'll do this again when I get enough questions to make another episode. Where the fuck did the idea of sorcery come? From where the fuck did the idea of sorcery come? I'm going to try to think about that. I think as my uncle began to develop his theology of Christ in all things and what exactly that meant and all the definition of things, that the idea of devil worship and sorcery, I know in the New Testament sorcery is referenced, and the idea of the occult, which is viewed as sorcery in all its forms. That as he began to develop that theology of righteousness, so too necessarily was created the idea of wickedness, of sorcery. Because the religion was fueled from its very core by the duality of good and evil and the war in heaven and on earth. And by war in heaven, I mean uh, the 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 holy watchers and the fallen watchers struggling against one another, the devil and God wrestling for the hearts of men. And I think a key element, I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but I just now thought of it because guess whose brain is a sieve? This fella. Um, there was a concept that man was the object of creation. I may have touched on this, and I may have even talked about it, and I might be forgetting entirely. So if this is a repeat, guess what? Too bad, we're putting it in another context. Man is the object of creation, meaning that man is the ultimate expression of God's creative ability. All things on earth were created for man, because men had a vision of creative purpose. There was a goal to their life, that God created each soul with a very specific intent, whether that be to speak the truth, or to bring happiness, or to walk in righteousness, or to embody the feelings of patience, or whatever. It was that when God created the earth through a concept called oneness, that God created everything for each soul as if no other person existed and everything was created for that person. So that's why the elements of the earth were compelled to apply the power of their definitions to the prayers of a righteous man, because everything that person was the pentacle of creation, was the object of creation. So, because a wicked man was also the object of creation, because that was his original creative purpose, the elements of the earth could not disobey. They would simply allow themselves to be misused, or were compelled to be misused. The fallen watchers rejected that man was the pinnacle of creation, instead choosing themselves as the pinnacle of creation, and that's why they're wicked, because they're selfish, and they refuse to contribute their definitions to man, and didn't make it their life mission to lead men back to Christ, or to be the salvation of man. I may have never said anything as clear in my life as I just said that. So, captured on film, folks. Enjoy that while it lasts, because in my next sentence I'll probably be stammering. It's all good. So that, I think, is where the idea of sorcery came from. That it developed as the shadow of righteousness. So it was necessary and integral, and I think that the Dead Sea Scrolls and the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls was a tremendous bombshell in community. Not only did it give the community rule, it was then used to prove that Christ was a member of the Essenes, or the I don't know, they were a kind of cult in that region of along the coast of the Dead Seas. I don't know if there's any proof of them being around during the time of Christ, but if they were, I'm sure he knew of them. I can't imagine they were all that secret. I've never heard anyone else make that claim, simply because I think there's a dearth of evidence, as is with much of that whole Christ deal, the whole messianic movement there. But it is what it is, and people believe how they're going to believe. Um, so yeah, that was and is their somewhere in this house. The darkness is playing that I believe in a thing called love song. Somebody's got their TV on way too fucking loud. Sorry for that. It is what it is. You're in the house. We're in the house. So if you can't handle a little bit of the darkness, and gosh, if that doesn't feel ironic, I don't know what to tell you. Anyways, I think that's about all I have. If you have more questions, I'd love to expand on anything. But yeah, pretty much that's sorcery. So yeah, who knows? You don't know. This could all be being recorded by a master sorcerer, which apparently I am. At any rate, I thank you for watching. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe. Hit the little dingly bell if you want. Get notified. That always helps. Comment, question, always question. Keep in mind, this is my perspective. Other people have a very different perspective. So take it with a grain of salt. Because I'm absolutely I'm not objective in this at all. So there's that. But I hope you all have had a good week since last week, and I hope until I see you again next Sunday that you have an excellent week. Live in peace. We're done.